It was supposed to be a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where you sip your coffee, sit on your porch, and enjoy the hum of the neighborhood waking up. But instead, I was greeted by something way more unbelievable. I stepped outside and noticed. My air conditioning unit, yes, my AC was halfway disconnected, wires hanging, bolts loosened, and crouched beside it. None other than Karen from 2 houses down. She had gloves on and a wrench in hand, like she was working on her own backyard. Project ... Except it was my unit. My name was still printed right on the side. At first, I honestly thought it was a mistake. I asked her calmly, "Hey, what are you doing with my AC?" She stood up like I'd just offended her soul. Without missing a beat, she shouted, "This is my property. You installed it on my side." Mind you, it was clearly on my lot, connected to my house, and had been there since I moved in. Then things got even wilder. She pulled out her phone, dialed 911 in front of me, and told the dispatcher that I was stealing her air conditioner. I was so stunned I couldn't even respond for a second. The cops actually showed up in minutes, and she ran toward them like she was the victim. "There he is. That's him. He's the one who stole my AC," she yelled, pointing straight at me. That's when everything shifted. One of the officers paused, glanced between me and the clearly tampered unit, and asked a question that made Karen's whole story start to fall apart. And right there, on the front lawn, with neighbors watching from their windows, everything started unraveling fast. But trust MIT only got crazier from there. So while the cops were checking things out, I just stood there in disbelief. I mean, how do you even explain to someone that your neighbor is literally in the middle of stealing your AC unit and then has the nerve to call the cops on you? It felt like some bizarre prank, except nobody was laughing. Karen kept pacing around the front yard, arms waving dramatically, telling the officers some wild story about how I'd moved the unit from her property during the night. Meanwhile, the AC was clearly installed where it's always been, right outside my bedroom window, with concrete footings and all. The officer who spoke to me seemed a bit skeptical, but still cautious. He asked when I noticed it missing if I had any proof it was mine. I told him I had the installation receipt and security camera footage too. But even while I said it, I could see Karen trying to listen in, probably thinking up her next lie. She even told one officer she had a bill of sale, which I knew was completely fake because again's been in my yard since day one. What's worse, she kept tossing in random accusations to confuse things. She claimed I had trespassed on her lawn the week before. She even brought up some noise complaints she supposedly filed months ago, like she was trying to paint me as some neighborhood menace. But the truth is, I've barely even spoken to her since I moved in. She just always gave me that look, the one where you know she's watching, waiting to find something to complain about. The tension in the air was thick. A few neighbors started gathering near their porches, whispering. One even pulled out a phone and started recording. And just when I thought it couldn't get more ridiculous, one of the officers asked Karen a question that made her freeze for a split second. The officer looked Karen straight in the eye and asked, "Ma'am, if this AC is yours, why is it connected to his electrical panel and not yours?" For the first time since all this started, she didn't have a quick answer. She blinked, stumbled over her words, then muttered something about the installer making a mistake. That's when I realized she wasn't just trying to lie her way through this. She actually thought she could rewrite the whole story and come out looking like the victim, while the officers stepped aside to talk things over. I went back inside and pulled up my security footage. The timestamp clearly showed Karen stepping into my yard early that morning, tools in hand, and messing with the unit. I started emailing the clips over, but I could feel my heart racing. I didn't know if they'd even take it seriously or just file it away as some neighborly dispute. Meanwhile, one of my neighbors, Mr. Jenkins, walked up quietly and asked me what was going on. He's lived on this street for 20 years and has seen more than a few incidents with Karen, he said. She's pulled stuff before, but this is new. He even mentioned how she'd once accused another neighbor of stealing her trash bins. That one ended in a yelling match, but nothing close to police showing up down across the yard. Karen was now speaking softly with one officer, almost whispering. Her whole tone had changed. Gone was the loud, aggressive energy. Now she looked nervous, like she realized things were slipping out of her control. She glanced over at me a few times, then at the small crowd of neighbors still watching. Everyone had their phones out. People were recording. Whispers turned into quiet gasps as word spread. Karen had been caught red-handed. But what none of us knew yet was that this wasn't just about an air conditioner. This was only the surface of something bigger, something that would drag up. Old HOA drama, hidden grudges, and secrets Karen never wanted anyone to find out. The tension kept climbing as the officers paced back and forth between us, talking quietly into their radios. Karen had completely shifted gears, now arms folded, eyes darting from neighbor to neighbor, clearly realizing the crowd was not on her side. But she wasn't backing down either. If anything, she looked more determined, like she was digging in for a final stand. She told one of the officers that she didn't feel safe with me around and claimed I had threatened her before. I nearly laughed, but the look on the officer's face made it clear they had to treat every word seriously. Meanwhile, I stood there clutching my phone, waiting for them to finish reviewing the footage I'd just emailed. Every second felt longer than the last. The neighbors were whispering louder now. People were texting others to come out and see what was going on. Even the mail carrier slowed down to watch. You could feel that something big was about to drop. Then one officer walked over and asked if I'd mind showing him the electrical panel to confirm the unit's wiring. I took him around the side of the house, heart pounding, and showed him everything. The wires were old, dusty, clearly undisturbed, exactly how you'd expect them to. Look, if they'd been in place for years. He nodded, said nothing, and radioed something back to his partner. When we came back around front, the other officer was talking to a new car that had just pulled up. It wasn't another squad car, it was someone from the HOA board. Apparently, Karen had called them too, claiming this was a community property dispute. That's when things really started boiling over. The HOA rep took one look at the situation, scanned the crowd, and then gave Karen a look I'll never forget. It wasn't shock. It was disappointment, like he'd seen this coming all along. Karen's face turned red. She tried to interrupt, saying something about her property lines, old agreements, even her missing documents. But nobody was buying it anymore. And just when it felt like the truth was finally cornering her, the officer who checked my footage stepped forward, holding his phone. ... And everything went silent. The officer held up his phone, about to speak, when suddenly Karen blurted out, "Wait, that video is fake. He's tech-savvy seen his setup inside." Everyone turned to look at her. It was a last-ditch effort, and she knew it. Her voice cracked under the pressure, and the more she talked, the less sense she made. She claimed I had deep-faked the footage and was framing her, just to make her look bad in front of the HOA. The neighbors exchanged confused glances. Ugh. Even the HOA rep raised an eyebrow. But before the officer could respond, the second twist dropped like a bomb. One of the newer neighbors, Jenny, came walking up from the back of the street, phone in hand. I have something you all might want to see," she said nervously. Apparently, Jenny had her own security cameras that overlooked part of Karen's yard and by chance had caught something the rest of us hadn't. The night before, just past midnight, Karen had been seen dragging tools and a dolly across her lawn toward my house. But that wasn't all. Jenny's footage showed Karen stopping by her own AC Unitious. She had one-two and taking a few pieces off it. She then wheeled them over to my side. That's when it clicked. Karen wasn't just trying to steal. My unit, she was trying to swap parts from her broken one onto mine and then claim the whole thing was hers. The timing, the story, the missing documents. It was all part of a cover-up. It's a sloppy one. The officers huddled together again, this time looking far more serious. Karen stood frozen, her confidence cracking completely now. The neighbors were in shock, murmurs spreading fast. And just as the officer turned back to speak, another police car pulled up, this one with a plainclothes officer stepping out and heading straight toward Karen. He asked her one quiet question that stopped her cold. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about an AC unit anymore. The moment I decided to fight back, everything came to a head faster than I expected. I managed to find a lawyer willing to look into the records more deeply, someone who wasn't intimidated by the HOA or Karen's reputation. Together, we uncovered something shocking. Karen had been using forged documents to claim authority over properties that weren't actually in the HOA. The pool draining, the threats, the false complaints, all part of a calculated plan to scare homeowners into submission and expand her control. Armed with proof, I confronted Karen in front of the HOA board and several neighbors. I laid out everything: the forged paperwork, the city inspector reports that cleared me, even the anonymous threats. For the first time, the neighbors started whispering, some nodding in disbelief. Karen's confident facade began to crack. But just as I thought I had the upper hand, she dropped a bombshell. She revealed she wasn't just acting alone. There was a bigger group behind her, a private investor circle trying to take over the neighborhood piece by piece. The HOA was just a front for a property grab, and she was their inside person. Suddenly, the fight wasn't just about my pool or Property 8, was about something much larger and far more dangerous. But the real twist came when my lawyer uncovered an old clause in the neighborhood's founding documents. It turned out, residents like me, those technically outside the HOA, had special protections that no one else knew about. This clause made Karen's entire operation illegal and gave me the power to challenge not just her, but the entire corrupt setup. It was a game changer. In the days that followed, the tide started to turn. The city opened a formal investigation, neighbors began rallying together, and Karen's hold on the community weakened. But even as I breathed a sigh of relief, I couldn't shake the feeling that this battle had just scratched the surface. If there was a hidden circle behind Karen, what else were they hiding? And was my fight really over, or was it just the beginning?